So I guess I can start with introductions for myself, or Boyan's here now, so that's okay too.
Oh, wonderful.
We can all participate. So hi everyone, my name is Phoebe Kim. I'm a senior manager for the multi-cloud solutions architecture team at VMware. I'm based out of Dallas in the United States, of course. You'll see my dog walk around in the background. His name's Toby. He might come and say hi. So I guess a little bit about like what I do. So currently I lead a team of multi-cloud solutions architects in the America region for VMware. So I guess from a day-to-day perspective, it's a lot of, it consists of one-on-ones with my like direct reports to make sure, you know, they're happy on the team, they're doing what they want to do, and that you know, I'm helping them in their career progression, as well as if they have any blockers in their current engagements, kind of helping remove those blockers for them. I also have a lot of interlocks with different sales leaders within the organization to make sure that our team is aligned with everyone and we can collaborate in opportunities as they come along. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day as a senior manager. And so anything, I guess, in some of the management questions, you could definitely ask me, but actually, because Angie was unable to join, I could answer any of the solutions architect question as well, because that's what I used to be literally 4 months ago before I transitioned into being a manager. And actually, in place of Angie, Marjorie is here, and Marjorie is my manager. So actually, any management questions actually could probably go to Marjorie. So Marjorie, would you like to introduce yourself?
And it's funny how this all worked out. I was just wishing them a great event, and Phoebe's like, hey, can you join us, the panelists? I'm like, well, I have the time blocked off. So yes, we can make this work. But glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Phoebe. Always love these types of events where we can teach folks a little bit more about the different types of careers that exist within tech. I think that's extremely important, that we broaden the view of what exists. So as Phoebe mentioned, my name is Marjorie Abdelkrim. I lead the multi-cloud architecture and strategist here at VMware, and we're a global organization. We work with customers on a daily basis. We help customers understand the multi-cloud space and how they can leverage our technologies along with other cloud technologies for their digital transformation, and more from an infrastructure and application perspective, less from a dev standpoint. I'm part of the leadership team, as Phoebe mentioned. I've been in a leadership role probably for like 15 years. It's been a long time. So definitely feel free to send any of the leadership and management questions my way, but here to also encourage folks on, you know, the different career paths that exist, and then hope to be able to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks again, Marjorie, for joining. I know it's last minute. And our third panelist we have today is Bohyun. So Bohyun, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, my name is Bohyun. I'm a product manager working in the modern apps division in VMware. I started my career as an engineer, and I was always very much interested in what product development would be more appealing for the customers, and how I can make you know, products that customers would love. And I got more and more interested in chatting with more customers, understanding their needs, and eventually interfacing them, and learned about the role of product manager, representing the customer's voice. And I was able to make the transition from an engineer to a product manager. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and I have to say I really enjoy chatting with customers, but also as a former engineer, it's been really helpful to kind of have that kind of experience and background, and representing both teams as well. Nice to meet you folks.
Awesome. So I guess just to break some ice, obviously, like this is a panel. This is open Q&A for anyone to participate. If you'd like to come off mute, just let us know, or you could just put the questions in the chat as well, and we'll answer them as we go. To, I guess, kick things off, we had a couple of questions that we kind of thought of that maybe might be interesting to open the conversation. So one thing is, at least one question that I get a lot from people is, hey, if I'm a developer, or if I'm a solution architect, or if I'm in sales, like, how do I change my career to maybe, or transition into something that's different, right? So I guess maybe Bohyun, like you can maybe start with that question. Like, how did you get into your role from being an engineer, and how was that transition for you?
Sure. So I joined as an engineer working on control panel for a database. It was one of the database companies based in Boston, had been acquired by a bigger company. And the company really allowed you to explore many different sort of roles of responsibilities. So even as an engineer, it was very much encouraged to talk to the field folks, working on sales engineering or post-sales. And you were encouraged to join customer meetings to understand better of what the customers are looking for in a product. And so I was able to kind of extend my roles and responsibilities or join some of those meetings to better understand, the product that I'm building would be more beneficial for the customers. And just the more and more exposure I had there and understanding that, whichever work that I would take on and being able to build for the customers would also impact how the field can talk about the product and shape the direction of the product. And it really helped me understand how much impact I can bring overall. And I think that really sort of motivated me, as an engineer, you're not just building one part of the product that you're focused on, you're actually bringing a ton of impact, not just for the customers, but for your internal teams as well. And that also kind of encourage that kind of internal knowledge flow as well. As an engineer, you might have more information about how the product should work or how you're thinking about it representing the database control panel, as opposed to the field team might have more information about here's what customers would find more useful, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really enjoy that kind of collaborative interaction. And I think that was one of the other things that really helped me understand and encouraged me to kind of go out of some of the day-to-day responsibilities and building software that was robust and scalable and performant. And I think that I just kind of continued to seek out of sort of like the day-to-day responsibilities or expectations and continue to have that conversation. And eventually learned that the position that I might be maybe perhaps more interested in is product management, and started to talk to some of the internal product managers and understood from their perspective what their responsibilities were, and trying to shadow them and things like that. And so these were just some of the ways that I got to learn about the role that I didn't particularly know that was what it was called or what I was interested in knowing a little bit more.
Awesome. And I guess I'll pass the same question to Marjorie. Like, how did you get into a leadership role, and how was that transition for you?
You're asking me to dig into the bowels of old memory. No, I'm just kidding. So my first leadership role, it was actually one where someone saw some potential and kind of said, hey, you should consider going into leadership. And when folks ask this question on how do they transition into a leadership function and what are some of the things that they should be doing, the advice that I give folks is make your desires of your career progression very well known, right? Your leadership, while they're there to help you, they're not psychics and they're not going to know what you want to do next. So unless you're very clear about what you want your next steps to be, don't expect them to come to you and say, hey, you should consider this next step. That's more the fluke and the rarity than the consistent approach of how folks progress in their career. So one, make sure that people know what your career desires are. Two, once you've defined that you want to go into leadership, start looking at what are some of the internal classes that you might have at your company that exist for aspiring leaders, and ask your manager, can I be put in those classes? I'd love to learn a little bit more about leadership transition. And then even ask to shadow your manager on management calls, right? So one of the things that I like to do is invite aspiring leaders or potential leaders that we see in our organization to be a part of my staff calls. So Phoebe's part of my leadership team. We have other individuals that are part of our SA staff, and they join our calls as well to help give us more of a real view of what's going on a day-to-day basis versus what, you know, Phoebe and I might be exposed to. So that's another thing. Ask them, hey, can I sit in on some of your non-confidential calls? I'd love to listen to hear how the management team is thinking about things and how y'all are strategizing. And I'd love to contribute my ideas. And then I think once you do make that transition, for me personally was, you know, asking a lot of questions. I think, you know, many of us are put into management roles without the right tools, right? Someone agrees that you have the potential and they believe that you can do it, but there's no training. Sometimes they just throw you into it. And Phoebe can speak to that as well, right? We kind of threw her into a leadership role, but it's, you know, it's asking a lot of questions and never feeling like there's a question that's dumb to ask. I think every question is a valid one, especially as you're learning, and spend time not just with your direct manager, but also your peers, learning from them, understanding from them what they do, how they manage, and how they, you know, they grow their teams. And I think as a manager, that's one of the biggest skills is listening. So you being able to ask questions and listening to what your team has to say is going to be the biggest part for an individual that's transitioning into a management role.
Awesome. Like I definitely have to, like, I definitely agree on the fact that sometimes you just get put into a role and then you're like, okay, I don't know really where to go. So I think, yeah, internally there's a lot of trainings available too, but externally as well. So actually, John, he's also on our leadership team, and he recommended that I take some like leadership certificate or classes through like eCornell, for example. So like VMware sponsored some of these classes, and I got a chance to take those. So it's not just like internally that you can develop, you know, some of these skills and learn how to be a leader or what it means to be a manager. You could also look outside. And I love what you first said, that like letting other people know what you want to do or where you want to go. I think it's really important because actually I sort of stumbled onto my role. So the story is I was on a team at VMware doing tech marketing for VMware Cloud. And then I was looking for a different challenge, different opportunity. And I was talking to John and Marjorie really about like, hey, like maybe I want to join your team and become a multi-cloud architect. Because, you know, I was just in that technical architect role for a while and I was comfortable with that. But John asked me like, hey, so what do you want to do, let's say in 2-3 years from now? And then I'm like, well, I think I will probably want to try out some kind of leadership position, maybe help people as a people manager, see how that goes for me, right? And then he's like, well, I kind of need one now. Let me talk to Marjorie and see what she thinks. And then she was like, okay, cool. So it just kind of the opportunity came along because I mentioned that that's maybe what I'm interested in. So definitely letting, you know, people around you know what you want to do and where you want to go. And then, you know, they kind of keep your name in mind when those kind of opportunities come along, versus if you don't tell anybody, how are they supposed to know, right? So like that's sort of how I came into my role. So I think definitely, Marjorie, that's a good point. Just letting people know what you like to do. So I guess one thing though I didn't cover in the beginning is like how do you define your role and how do you measure success? And I think that's different per different roles. And I think that's one thing that like you don't really think about until you get into the role. So I thought it might be interesting to, you know, talk about it as people are considering different positions, right, that are outside of, let's say, just pure software development. So I guess I'll just start again with Bohyun and like we'll go around in circles. So Bohyun, if you could tell us more about, hey, what do you do on a daily basis as a product manager and how do you measure success in your role?
Yeah, sure. There's honestly many different ways, I think, to measure success, depending on where you're in your career and which organization that you're working with. I know that some organizations might have more emphasis around, with the user experience that the customers are interfacing, or perhaps some of the companies are deeply focused on making sure that the internal teams are incredibly happy, and then it returns it produces more outcome that customers will eventually be happier about and things like that. But personally, as a person who interfaces both customers and internal teams, and also internal teams not just focused on the product and engineering, research and development, but also marketing and sales for enablement, I think that it's really important to be able to understand all the different perspectives that everyone is bringing to the table, and try and figure out what would make the most sense and add the most value for the customers. And so from product sort of development perspective, we have OKRs typically that measures success for product launch or any kind of milestones that the internal teams would be very much focused on. And also from customer perspective, we have different various ways of thank you the various ways of measuring sort of happiness or satisfaction level from customer view. It could be like an NPS score that typically when you go on any kind of SaaS product, you would be asked like how on a scale of 1 to 10, would you recommend this product for your colleagues or other folks. But also there's many different ways of measuring success for specific features that you're working on. So suppose you're working on a website and you introduce this new feature, how well is it being adopted by customers? And there's many different ways of measuring success depending on what you're really focused on during that time, whether it be feature development or internal team success and happiness, customer success and things like that. And I think that a lot of the times it's more art than science. You really kind of have to be aware of various different perspectives and how different teams feel about it, including obviously your customers. But I think, as a product manager, one of your primary role is to represent the voice of a customer. And so if you're building a feature or product that, you truly believe that it would represent the customer voice, you as a person who is, owning the success of the product would often be asked, oh, well, the engineering team feels that it would take us X amount of time to build this, and we might not be able to meet this timeline. You have to kind of constantly be really creative about the solutions that will make the customers happy and be able to match some of the timelines that, especially working with larger clients, they might have internal deadlines and timelines that you also have to be aware of as well. And so I think that kind of keeping all of that in mind and also letting the internal team to understand and know more about some of the inner workings of the customers' timelines and some of what the field team is saying, and kind of always being in the middle and communicating that fluidly, just because not everyone has that same perspective as you do. Is kind of how I would like to measure success for myself as a product manager, but also understanding that the more transparent you are, the more you communicate, the more perspectives that you can share and let other folks understand in terms of what would ultimately make the customers happy, because everyone, I think, has the same goal in terms of making a product that customers love. And so that's sort of how I like to view, not in necessarily the way that measuring success has to be one way or the other, but it can come in many different forms.
Awesome. Thanks, Bohyun. I know I remember when I first heard the word product manager, I wasn't sure what they do or, what their role is or how they define, your success. So I think it's really great that you joined us today. I guess, Marjorie, I'll pass it off to you to kind of talk about, what it means in leadership or in a management position.
Yeah. So, similar to what Bohyun was saying around OKRs and defining that's kind of the business side of it, right? Making sure that we, as a leadership team, identify key results that are important to the success of the organization, how we continue to impact, and for us, right, it's customers, right? So how we continue to impact our customers and drive the appropriate outcome. So for our team, those key results that we tend to focus on are on customer activities, innovation, which revolves around IP creation and lab creation, right, and being able to develop additional assets. That's another key result that we tend to focus on as a business as a whole. But as an individual, as a person, and what I look for myself when I'm trying to track success, I look at, are we creating development plans for our individual contributors within the organization? Are we making sure that everyone is talking about their career development and looking at what those next steps are, and whether or not that they're putting together training plans for themselves that will both impact the business as well as their own career development. The other piece is retention. That's a key factor for me as a leader, making sure that I can retain talented individuals within the organization, making them feel valued, making them feel like they can continue to contribute. That's another key component that I make sure that we're tracking as a leadership team. And then there's obviously other components around, are we attaining our quota as a business, right? Are we making sure that we're getting our number right? Because we're in sales, so we are responsible for selling at the end of the day. And while as technologists, many of us don't like to talk about carrying a number, we do at the end of the day, and that is still a key component to our business. But I'd say the people aspect of it for me as a manager and as a leader, they're the most important ones, right? Making sure that the people are getting what they need, that we're removing the roadblocks for them on a day-to-day basis, are other more soft, results that I look at, and are we able to continue to move forward?
Thanks, Marjorie. Yeah, I think that was one thing that was very different for me when I transitioned from just being an individual contributor and an architect to being in the leadership team. Like your success criteria definitely changes, and it becomes more of we and an organization and as a company, not so much like what am I doing, right? So I guess for me, to talk from more of a architect perspective, so I've been a customer success architect at VMware, and basically that's a post-sales architect, kind of helping the customer adopt different technology or honestly troubleshoot some of the issues that come along with using a specific product in a way that was maybe not intended by the customer and stuff like that. And I've been also like technical marketing architect as well, and a solutions architect. So from that point, as an individual contributor, I think like I at least measured my success from like two perspectives. So one, obviously from the business, right? That am I bringing everything that's valuable to the customers? Am I making sure that our customers are happy with the results of any engagement that I deliver, whether it's a workshop, is a presentation, is an architecture, logical design, whatever it is, right? That just making sure they are happy. And I think for me, that was just one measure from at least a business perspective that was very important. I think the second for me was just a personal professional growth. So like Marjorie said, as a leader, it's really important for you to enable and care about like where your like direct reports are going in their career. So for me, like being an individual contributor, it was very important. I always had my own personal development goals. And to continue learning the technology, right? Or getting into new technology so that I'm not bored kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So I always had at least, I would say, one or two certifications that I would like to do to help kind of motivate myself to learn something different every year. And then also to try to get deeper into a technology that I am supposed to be an expert on for my customers, right? So whether like when I was an NSX architect for a while, just getting deeper into NSX and knowing all of the release notes and issues ahead of time, like that was a responsibility that I took on myself to make sure that I'm up to date with everything and I can answer questions for our customers. And then, of course, having the certifications, because I'm one of those people who likes checking things off. So I get more motivated if I have something to say like, okay, I've done this. So in order to force myself to learn something new, that was kind of one way that I would do it. So for you, if you're that kind of person, I think that definitely helps, studying for a certification. So that was kind of at least my perspective from solutions architect. And I guess another question that like as panelists, we kind of came up in the beginning that we thought might be helpful for people to hear is, oh my gosh, where is it? What were some of the challenges or fears that you had when you started this new role that you are in currently? And how did you overcome those? So maybe we'll go backwards and start with Marjorie this time instead of picking on Bohyun.
Oh gosh, okay. I thought I was going to have some time to get over the fear factor that you just instilled, but no. I think for me, so I'll talk about my current role, right? Because management, I mean, there are many fears over the year, but specifically this last role that I'm in here with you and the rest of the team, I wasn't a cloud expert, right? So for me, getting into the cloud space was something new, and leading a team of superstars. I mean, if you all meet the team that is part of my organization, they're all super smart, superstars. They know so much about technology, about cloud, and leading an organization with so much brain power is extremely intimidating. You get on these conversations with them and they start talking about things that you're just like, wait, I need to Google that because we just said. So it's a lot of having to, prepare for who you're going to be talking to, especially if you're talking to a team member that wants to express, stress or concern about something in the product area that you're not comfortable with. So for me, that was my biggest fear, is just walking into conversations that I wasn't fully prepared for, and then not coming across as having the right skill set and not being able to help folks. I think that's always my fear, is being as prepared as possible, because as a leader, it's not your job to know everything, and I'm comfortable with that, but it is your job to know how to remove those roadblocks for your team. And if you don't understand the core of the problem that your team member is explaining to you, then you might not be able to help them. And it's extremely important that you at least understand the basics of what they're putting across in front of you, so that you can help them with whatever the issues are. So I've learned a ton from the team, from Phoebe, from John, from the rest of the leadership team, and all of the essays that I talk to on a regular basis. It's always a humbling experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Marjorie. Yeah, no, our team is like really smart sometimes. Actually, the other day, we were talking about something with the team in Asia Pacific region. And actually one of them, well, he tried to make a joke, but he said like, what is the OKR for this? And then I actually didn't know what it was. So I was like, sorry, what is this? And he's like, oh no, I just try to make a joke. And I'm like, oh, well, technically I should know this. So no, that I always feel like, yeah, I'm always learning something from everybody on this team. And no, that's definitely good. That I appreciate you sharing that. Boyan, I'll pass it off to you. Yeah, what were some of the challenges or fears that you had when you were starting your role as a product manager, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I can empathize with, what if I don't know the right answer? Everyone surrounding me is super smart. I think that, and I think it's a good problem to have. I love learning from the teams that I work with, and also customers. And so definitely have that, quote unquote fear every day, but I think it's a good one. When I first got started as a product manager, I think, coming from an engineering background, a lot of the times you jump to troubleshooting mode immediately, rather than focusing on more of the discovery and understanding what is the bigger use case that the customer is trying to solve, rather than this one technical problem that you might be able to offer help, but that your fellow engineer, other team members would be able to help, just because you have built that rapport. If you were to make an internal transition within the organization, which is something that I did, from an engineer to a product manager. And so you kind of really have to shift gears in terms of, even though you're still working in the same company, or even if you were going to another company and you made a transition, perhaps after getting an MBA, or maybe you went to some sort of an academic institution, or somehow you were able to find an opportunity that allowed you to become a first-time product manager. I think that it's always fearful at the beginning in terms of, okay, what is my day-to-day responsibility? How am I going to be successful at it? And so starting with kind of the earlier question, and how do I measure success in my day-to-day work, or whether it be a quarterly goal, I think that always having the customer in mind, and winning for them, and understanding what their needs are. And I think that kind of bringing that back to your team was something that I wasn't necessarily aware of at the beginning. And kind of jumping straight to the troubleshooting mode or problem solving can sometimes be really helpful during that point, but maybe later on you might have talked to more customers and then collected more data points that allowed you to become smarter about some of the ways that you could implement a solution for. And so having that kind of different mindset, especially if you're coming from a developer background, I think that knowing that you're now in a different role, and knowing that, yes, you might be able to solve something immediately, but always being more open-minded and flexible about, hey, you might have to ask more questions that the customers might not even know to bring up. And I think that, it's your job to kind of, pick the customer's brain, or even your internal team, in terms of, hey, have we thought about this? Or did you know that there was this workaround? And then it basically just opens up for more conversation and knowledge sort of flow that you can have with the customers or with the engineering and design team that you're working with. And always being open-minded about the fact that, hey, you used to actually know the code base that you were working in. Now you've transitioned to being a product manager. Your job is not to know all the answers on the spot when the customers are asking for it. Your job is to try and fully understand as much as possible in terms of what the customers are looking for, what their bigger business objectives are, and kind of reading that and being able to ask smart questions to get to that answer, and then bringing that back to the team and having a very transparent conversation and being really open-minded and about the different ways that you can solve it, because there's honestly so many different ways to get from point A to point B. And so being open-minded in terms of solutioning, I think, is also really important. And I think that, it's always work in progress for me as well. And, there's always new tech coming up, and again, being really open-minded about them and having open conversations about how you can approach solutioning is always super helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I think definitely being open-minded in technology especially is very important, and just to have a very open culture. So I guess for me, I could talk about like two instances. So for sure, one, I echo like what Bohyun and Marjorie said about you not knowing everything. I think that was my biggest thing when I first joined VMware as an architect, because I also was joining a very senior team. So I was the youngest one and the lowest level like architect essentially on our team. So, and everyone's been doing this thing for like the last 15 years, like 15, 20 years almost. So I think definitely coming in and joining that team was very, very, I guess, what do you call that? I can't even think of a word. The word that Marjorie used earlier. Intimidating. There you go. Intimidating is the word I was looking for. And when I was joining the team, I think when I became a manager, I guess the biggest fear I had was that one, I was a new manager joining a team that's already well established with a lot of people. So I didn't want me joining to disrupt anything that the team was doing, or for anyone with to not want to work for me, right? Versus like working for John, who they used to work before, like I came along. So, and on top of that, essentially I'm managing people mostly who are also older than me. So I think that was another fear that I had coming in, like, because like I know Marjorie has a story and I'm probably going to ask her to share this, but like, you come in and like you look, I mean, I kind of look like I'm in college, it doesn't really help the situation. And then I'm like managing people who are clearly, probably, definitely older than me. And sometimes, if you're, let's say, been in the industry like 20, 30 years and you like see somebody who looks like they're in college come and say, hey, I'm your new manager. I just feel like it's one of those things you could either take it the right way or not and say like, okay, this is like not going to work out just because you're young. So that was definitely one of my fears, even though I knew the team members were great in personality. And I knew like Marjorie and John already developed a very solid and supportive, inclusive community. Like I still felt that, I think, when I was coming in. I'll say there's nothing honestly I've done to overcome the fear. It just happened that when I have my one-on-ones with people, they were all so super nice. So they kind of overcame the fear for me. But I'm going to pass it to Marjorie to actually share her story when she first joined and she first became a manager, because I really enjoyed that story and gave me hope.
Gave you hope.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So my first leadership role was when I was 28. So I was fairly young. And also, if you all are familiar with, kind of the infrastructure space, it is a more mature, older workforce of specific gender and ethnic race, of which I'm neither. So I was a young Muslim, Hispanic, female, being put in a leadership role of a fairly senior team. And for me, I don't know, I guess I was always taught to just go with it and just deal with the blows as they come, right? And I don't know if I necessarily had the fear walking into it, but afterwards it kind of hit me. I had, one of the guys who was actually my mentor when I first joined the team. This was not here at VMware, this was at a different company. And he was, he was the guy that trained me from day one. He, let me shadow him. He took me under his wing and whatnot. And, when I finally took over the role, he's like, Marjorie, you're the age of my granddaughter. I can't work for you. And I looked and it hit me like, oh yeah, okay, now this whole like being super young, I guess I was just oblivious to it, or I don't know, just naive, innocent. It hadn't hit me yet. The world wasn't as cruel just yet. And he's like, it's just not going to work. I can't work for you. And I looked at him and I said, well, what can I do for you then? And he's like, I'm going to move into another team. And I said, that's fine. So, I helped him move into another part of the organization. And for me, that moment, I tried really hard to not make it about me. And I really, as I've aged, I've always looked back at that story and I know very clearly that was not about me, not about what I could bring to the table. And I helped him at the end of the day to move into another part of the organization. And I think that's always been something that I keep with me. If someone has an issue with who you are, how you identify, your age, whatever it may be about you that they don't like, that's their problem, not yours. And if you keep that in your mind as you continue to grow and develop yourself in your career, you'll be a much happier person. Because if you're going to take everything personally, you're just going to be miserable. And at the end of the day, that's how I took it. And I led that team for another 4 years. It was a consulting organization that I was a part of, and I loved that organization. They all stayed with me. He was the only one that had that issue, so I was thankful that the rest of the crew was willing to work with me.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thanks for sharing again, because I remember I shared my fear with you about this before I even joined the team. I think we had a call and I was like, hey, Marjorie, I don't know how this is going to work out. And I remember, okay, like that just made me feel better going in and joining the team. So I always love that story. Cool. So I know we only have about like 10 minutes or so left. If you guys have any questions, of course, I'm just like checking the chat as we go. Please let us know. But I guess, and on this topic of us being a minority gender in a sense, especially in technology, and maybe a lot of us, we're maybe only 5-6 years into our careers, maybe even less. I know, Marjorie, you just shared one about like, how do you kind of navigate the room or situation, being a woman or, just being young? That could be another thing. I guess, Bohyun, if you'd like to maybe share anything or give any advice on that topic, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm really grateful for opportunities like this where us women can gather in one room and share our experiences, just because it happens a lot. And unfortunately, where I walk into a room with talking about software architecture, maybe building a roadmap with some of the internal teams, engineering, and also with customers, the folks that are representing sales and sales engineering, and the customers themselves. I'm often sort of the only female in the room, and I think that in a way, us being remote for a lot of the different parts of the world has kind of brought that even more to light, because when you have a Zoom window with many different folks on the call, you can kind of see that you're sort of the only female, and it really kind of brings that to light. And oftentimes when you have your video on, you kind of feel like, oh, am I sort of the only female here on this call again? And you kind of get this fear of, how will I be heard? This is a room full of engineers. I'm supposed to represent the product and talk about roadmap or talk about something really technical. And I think that a lot of the times what I try to do before the meeting is understanding that you are still the product expert entering a room full of engineers, with customers, and you're representing the success of your product, and they're eager to have you hear about their needs and their pain points, and you can ask questions without sort of having that fear or bias. And I think that I really enjoyed some of the things that Marjorie was mentioning around kind of telling yourself that this is, something that is not in your control. Like you kind of have to give yourself that kind of pep talk sometimes. And I think it definitely helps. But I think folks are a lot more open-minded than I personally expected them to. And a lot of the times, coworkers and I, a lot of them are males, and we have had open conversations around, being a female and minority, and they're, very much interested in how can I help you feel more included and things like that. And so I always try to seek for conversations like that, whether it be within the organization or outside the organization. And Phoebe and I were chatting, earlier to talk about this event, and we said this is amazing that we got to know each other. Even in the same organization, we're all remote. We don't have time or opportunity to meet together, and I think kind of taking that to your advantage is also really helpful, because we can share at the very base or fundamental level very easily, and kind of overcoming that sort of barrier together, it actually makes us stronger together. And so I always try to turn it around in positively, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but today's Friday, so I think everything will turn out great. Sorry for the corny joke there.
No, it is Friday. So no, I always appreciate any happy Friday, messages and going for the weekend. So I think I definitely agree with Boyan on all of the things, right? So I think having the support is great. Like it took me a while, to be honest, to find the product manager who's a woman, who wanted to speak in this and could tell us about it, because I was like thinking at all the product managers I know at VMware, and they like all happen to be male. And I'm like, I really want a woman represented here today, like to show like, hey, this is a possibility, right, for us too. And it's not just for men in IT. So like, I really appreciate you joining today, by the way. Just you being here, I think it's just great. And so for me, yeah, the support I think is important. I think as a minority in IT, one thing, at least in the early days of my career, I was very afraid to speak out when something happened or something made me feel uncomfortable. And I think like just actually watching Marjorie for the last like year, it just has been very encouraging and motivating, because like she's not afraid to tell anybody anything. Like if something happens and she sees something that's wrong, right? So like I know in like, for example, when I was starting off my career, I was in tech consulting, and yes, I was out of college, and yes, I was young, but I was a team lead for like 16 engineers just out of college. And I was like a right-hand person for my principal at the time, given that nobody could do that just because they didn't have VMware experience. And I was helping a director trying to sell VMware projects. So I was in this kind of weird position where, yes, I was still young, and yes, I didn't know as much, but I was still leading a team, and I was like the only kind of expert for VMware in the firm. So, but then why I say that is because like I would go in a meeting, and obviously like I'd be the only person who looks like they're still in their 20s, and I'm the only woman, and I'm Asian. And then they always ask me like, hey, like, can you take notes? And that was like, that was just a very, very common thing where like I never said anything really, because I'd be like, sure, I'd be happy to take notes and contribute. So I'd be a little more passive aggressive now that I think back, right? I'd be like, I take notes for you, but I'll also answer all of your VMware questions, because that's technically what I'm here to do. And like, I think after a while, it sort of got to me. I'm like, that's not my job. I'm not there to take notes. I'm supposed to be the technical person. So I told my director about it, and actually he was very supportive. And like he admitted that like he didn't even think about it before. He just like said, oh yeah, thanks Phoebe for doing that too. So when I told him, I think after that there was a call where somebody's like, hey, can you take notes? And then he said, no, she's my architect. And like he stood up for me, and that meant a lot. But like it took a long time for me to just tell him that, right? Because it's just so uncomfortable to tell somebody. So I think sometimes like right now I'm very lucky to have Marjorie and John, like especially with John, like he's very supportive in all of this, and very like almost, I would say, overly aware. Like he's always trying to like be better, make everyone feel comfortable. So it's just, I'm very lucky in that sense, but not everyone is, because I've been in a position where I wasn't as lucky as now, right? So I think just having the courage to say something will help in the situation. And then you'll find that actually there are more people, like Boyan said, that is open and that is, you know, that is supportive. They just aren't aware. So you just have to let them know. But yeah, I guess I'll pass it off to Marjorie. If you had anything you'd like to add to this and encourage others like you've done for me.
Yeah, I think it takes folks a while to find their voice, and I encourage everyone to make sure that they constantly reflect on their day and what is the area where they could have used their voice for themselves or for others, because like Phoebe said, sometimes there is that unconscious bias and people just don't know. Like sometimes I'll call people out and they're like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. And then they apologize and then they stop, right? So I think it's important that we do carry that torch forward and make sure that we are calling it out, because my philosophy is, if it's not me, then who, right? Who's going to call people out? I can't assume that, another individual in the room, because most of the time I am, like Phoebe mentioned, the only woman in the room, another individual in the room is going to call out bad behavior because maybe they don't even know that it's happening. So I think it's important that we recognize that torch sometimes does land in our hand. And I know that for some folks it's a heavy one and they don't want to carry it forward. They're like, it's not my responsibility, which I get and I respect. But for me personally, I do believe that it is my responsibility to speak up and to say something and, test the waters, right? I think everyone has a different style. I'm from Jersey, so I use that as an excuse to be obnoxious and loud. So people accept it. They're like, oh yeah, it's just the New Jersey obnoxious is coming out when I go a little crazy. So, I use that and use that to your advantage. Bring your authentic self to the conversation. Say, hey, this is not cool, or I didn't appreciate that. You could do it in private. I tend to do it in public because if one person doesn't know, maybe the whole room doesn't know. But I also recognize that I'm in a senior position and I can do that. And it's my position to do that. And quite frankly, if I'm in a senior level role, I have to do that so that everyone else recognizes it. But for folks that are just starting out, if you want to make sure you're not limiting your career as well, you take the person aside, hey, by the way, that probably wasn't the best approach, or you probably could have said it differently. And I'm sure they'll appreciate it. And if they didn't, then you know what, now you know how to avoid this specific individual in the future, and you continue to learn how to, again, leverage your voice in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Marjorie. So I guess we didn't have any specific questions from the audience, but we came with some questions, and I think I hope that it was still helpful for everyone, and you got something out of this. I think Jackie, this has been recorded, so it will be shared on the Women Who Code Cloud YouTube channel. So you guys can definitely look back if anything. If you'd like to reach out, I think you could do that through Women Who Code. If you'd like, we can leave maybe our Twitter handles on here as well. We'd be happy to answer any questions if you reach out to us directly, and we'd be happy to help. So awesome. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Marjorie, and thank you Boyan for being on the panel. Thank you Jackie for hosting the event for us as well. And hey, happy Friday, as Boyan said, and everyone have a happy weekend.
Yes.
Right.
Take care, everyone.
So much. All right.
Have a good one. Bye.